Tetiana Anderson joins me now live from Washington, D.C. with more. Tetiana, President Erdogan has covered a lot of territory in both two high-level meetings and a televised gathering at the Brookings Institute. Take us through some of the highlights of what's been discussed so far.
Well, at the Brookings Institute earlier in the day, he had a very broad conversation with his audience. He talked about everything from the Cyprus dispute to Israeli-Palestinian relations. He said that, in his opinion, the Palestinians have been treated unfairly, but at the same time, he says that he has faith that the relationship between Israel and Turkey will flourish. He also, of course, talked about the refugee crisis and noted that in Turkey, some 150,000 Syrian babies have been born inside the country since all of this has happened, noting that this is a lot for this nation, and the nation is doing its part to take in as many refugees and care for them as possible. He also had a meeting, of course, with the Secretary of State, John Kerry. That happened yesterday. They had a broad discussion again about all of these issues, including border issues between Syria and Turkey. And we are hearing that President Erdogan did mention to Secretary Kerry that he hopes that the United States would take a much more proactive role when it comes to this Turkish cleric who's been living here in the United States. President Erdogan says that this person has attempted to overthrow his government and that he wants U.S. authorities to take action. No word on how John Kerry responded to that. Earlier on Thursday, Erdogan also had a very high-level meeting with Vice President Joe Biden, both of the men bringing top leaders to this particular meeting. They talked about a number of issues. It lasted for about an hour, but following that hour-long meeting, they actually had a side conversation, a more bilateral talk amongst themselves. Joe Biden has been very critical, at least in his last visit, of press freedoms in Turkey. And when it comes to the Brookings Institute, that is something that President Erdogan was questioned about. But President Erdogan said that these journalists who have been imprisoned in Turkey have nothing to do with their jobs. They're not imprisoned because of their jobs. He said that these people have gone through criminal trials and they've been convicted of terrorist activity. And we are expecting President Erdogan to have another high-level meeting later on Thursday. His office says that he is scheduled to have a private discussion with President Obama following this dinner that President Obama is hosting for all of the leaders who are here in Washington to attend this nuclear security summit. Andrea?
And now, quickly, if you can, Tetiana, Erdogan is actually in Washington to attend the nuclear security summit. What is that meeting expected to achieve?
Well, the focus of this meeting really is the sort of nexus between nuclear security and terrorism. It's something that leaders have talked about at the previous three meetings, but they talked about it in a very different prism. They talked about it as it relates to al-Qaeda. The new thing at this particular summit is that they will have a special session devoted to Daesh. So they will examine this nuclear security issue in the framework of Daesh. And of course, Daesh has been taking credit for a number of terrorist attacks, whether it's in Turkey, whether it's in Europe. So this is a concern for the whole host of nations that will be here, more than 50 nations represented here in Washington, D.C.
Okay,
Andrea?
Tetiana, we'll leave it there. Thanks so much for that. As always, live from Washington.